Welcome to this edition of the Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Raymond Wu. In today's program, we're going to be discussing the issue and the story of Chinese and Taiwanese immigrants all over the world, especially to countries like Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And we are delighted in today's program to have a very special guest, Professor Lan-hung Nora of the National Taiwan University Department of Geography. Well, welcome, Professor Chiang, to our program.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure is ours. Let's start talking about your research. I know you have focused your research primarily on social geography, about human interaction, especially regarding the lives of immigrants, of Taiwanese immigrants and Chinese immigrants, especially in countries like Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. May I ask, by beginning, that why do you study those countries in particular? Why those countries?
Yeah, I would put my study in the area of social geography, and
Yes.
I have done that in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It started when National Taiwan University started an interdisciplinary group on Australia studies, and each do something according to our discipline.
Yes.
And I chose to study one aspect of population. And I'm very interested in the immigrants abroad. And
Because you were one-time immigrant yourself?
Yes, it happened that my family immigrated to the U.S. quite a long time ago. But it did not occur to me that I would be doing such a subject for a study. Anyway, for the Taiwanese, they immigrated rather recently.
Yes.
About 30 years or more,
Yeah.
the so-called new Taiwanese immigrants. Of course, people went there much earlier.
Of
And
course.
because of research grant from National Science Council, I was able to launch my first study, and it took place in Australia as part of the Australia Studies program.
And so that was the origination of the research and the ongoing study that you have done on the immigrants. And you have, you have mentioned in your previous research that there's been a lack of in-depth analysis of the lifestyle of these immigrants, especially regarding the problems they have in terms of assimilation, adaptation to the new environment. What are some of the major challenges that you see for these Taiwanese and Chinese immigrants by moving to countries like Canada, New Zealand, and Australia? What kind of problems do you think they face when they make the move to go overseas?
Yeah, when I said there was a lack of in-depth study, that was based on the literature that have been published in various journals, and most of them has been conducted by people not from Taiwan.
Okay.
And they try to...
But they study the Taiwanese immigrants.
Yes, but they lump everybody together as Chinese.
Okay.
And usually they would put the Chinese from Hong Kong, from mainland China, and from Taiwan all together. So Taiwan would say out of hundreds of people, there will be
Different
like less
groups.
than 20 Taiwanese in the sample.
Yes.
So I thought this is not enough, and Taiwanese, Taiwan or Taiwan-born immigrants are not so visible in these studies.
Exactly.
And other than that, even though they have conducted research based on fieldwork, since they are not from Taiwan, they do not know the Taiwanese community very much. So I said that since I'm from Taiwan, I might as well look at the Taiwanese community abroad, and I get more and more interested in this issue,
Of course.
and find myself quite accepted in interviewing these people.
And what are the major problems that you discovered when they make the move to go overseas?
Well, I first found that in Australia, the employment rate is not very impressive. Actually, it is rather depressing that 1 year, the census shows that up to 25% of people were not in the labor force.
I mean, 25% of the Taiwanese
immigrants.
Really?
And luckily it came down. And then now it is, I think,
It's probably gone back up again given the global financial crisis that we're seeing.
Probably so, and some have returned.
Oh, okay.
So I find that getting work in a foreign country is not that easy. That is an obvious fact that you can tell that they are not well assimilated.
Of course. So one thing is unemployment or getting the right employment. How about
Right.
language?
Yes, language very much so. That is, in the census, it was revealed that the Taiwanese do not speak English very well. Actually, these are self-administered questionnaires that they have filled up. And probably this is also related to the difficulty in finding work. And apart from the lack of proficiency in English, the Taiwanese, their accreditation is difficult in Australia because
to be recognized.
Right, to be recognized. The certification system is very different.
Yes, and that often gets into the problem of finding the right employment.
Yes,
and maybe making the right friends for for their children as well. Yes.
Right, and so knowing the social rules, say being able to talk about sports and be able to drink with the Australians, socialize,
yes.
I think that's the cultural aspect that they are not adapted right away. And they were not like the old-timers,
no.
old-timer immigrants like myself going to the USA, that we were, as students, we were happy to pick up any jobs. We were doing typing or cataloging and even menial jobs for some people, working in the restaurant. But the Taiwanese, they started as the middle class.
Yes.
So they were not happy to take menial jobs.
Exactly.
And it would indicate that they don't want to have a downward social mobility. So I guess that's one reason why they were not employed. And probably they live on the savings.
Yes.
And they still keep the businesses in Taiwan. And
yes.
there were no urgency for them to work in the first year.
Professor Chiang, you mentioned about old-timer. I have one qualification to make. You're not part of the old-timer. You're not part of that group. But anyway, get back to your research. And you talk about, the kind of difficulties and the problems that these immigrants face. But how about if we turn the table around a little bit? And in your study, have you found if these host societies, whether it's Australia, Canada, or New Zealand, are they very receptive to these new immigrants? Are they, having them coming over from Taiwan, Hong Kong, or China? Are they opening up their arms and welcoming the new immigrants into their society? Do you find that to be true?
Well, I did find that they are welcoming societies. The policies, the programs they have started was meant to attract Asian immigrants to use their business migration program, the skill program, family reunion, and even independent of various sorts. I think in the policy, they are really working hard on multiculturalism. They're no longer white Australia or white New Zealand.
Yes.
So they are very welcoming. But this has happened in such a short time.
Of course.
I guess the whole society, the residents, are not that used to. So in some cases, our interviewees do express discrimination.
Really?
Right. That is personal encounter or looking for work. So it ends up that in these people would not easily find employment in the formal sector, for example, in the government jobs in Australia or New Zealand.
Of course.
And they become more and more self-employed as a result. And the Taiwanese are very smart. They have good business skills and, they're eager to learn English.
And very resilient as well.
Yeah, they fit the qualifications
yes.
of as required by these immigration agencies.
Especially I'm interested in terms of what you mentioned as instances of discrimination that these immigrants have experienced. In your interviews with them, have you found that there is a so-called perception gap, when they arrive in their host country? Because they might have a beautiful dream of starting a new life, bringing their families to a new country, and then thinking that the life that they will have in the host country will be that much more attractive than the one they had in the past. But somehow, of course, when reality checks in, that there are problems and difficulties to adjust. And so subsequently, do you think in your study that there is that perception gap, what's being expected, but it's not what's being delivered for these immigrants? Do you find that to be...
actually, you raised a very good question. We can actually study perception gaps of different ethnic groups.
Of course.
The Greek, the Italians,
of course,
and even the British who came to Australia
from the very beginning.
Actually, it is a very good theme that people have different perception gaps. Definitely so in the case of Taiwanese. I still think that the immigration agencies have a role to play because when these Taiwanese apply to go abroad, they pay a lot of money,
of course,
for the fees, and they were taken to tours, tour around different cities and let them decide which city they want to live. Of course, they go to the more beautiful parts.
Of course.
They go to Melbourne, the cultural city, and then the Sunshine State of Queensland.
Yes.
Of course, they go to Sydney, and very good transportation. They were shown very good parts. And of course, whoever they visit, who were already there before them, that is the friends and relatives, would tell them the good things. So when they first arrived, they did find that there is a gap between the perception and the reality.
So do you think when they encountered the problems and the difficulties, many of the Taiwanese immigrants, would they revert back to their old ways and their old friends and just interact among themselves and not being able to assimilate to the mainstream culture? Do you find that to be the case?
Well, I guess the children get into the mainstream rather easily because the children are easily enrolled in school and got into the system. And for themselves, if they intend to find work, some of them have really looked around for 1 or 2 years and could not find work. Now, I don't know what the...
That's frustrating.
Right, that's very frustrating. And probably they did not ask this question of the immigration agencies of Taiwan, who is very happy to see these immigrants go, and I use the term, actually, I don't know how to translate it, a swarm of bees. Feng.
Yes, of course.
I find that this is very true of what Taiwanese
the integration
behavior.
effect. Yes, it's integrated among
right.
themselves.
So their friends go, and then they say, "Oh, so and so is applying. Why don't I apply?" So by the time they have finished application,
they swarm together.
Right, and there were only a few months left for them to decide are they going or not. And then on the very last week, they say, "Yes, I'll go. I give it a try." But then, they were not ready.
Okay.
Some of them actually study English before they go.
Yes, but didn't help.
Did not help very much.
Okay.
I think they were not used to the local accent.
Yes.
And that local people would not understand them.
Yeah. And then we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to continue with Professor Chiang and talk about some of the more in-depth problems that these new immigrants face when they move overseas. We'll be right back.